Hi again. Welcome back to me. This is Sol. This is the post-morning show, or this is the afternoon show. I don't know what to call it. But this is a very special show. I have invited, actually, I'm not quite sure how the conversation went, but a very cool gentleman by the name of John Bass. He has offered to just have a chat with me about certain things with the World of Warcraft, with regards to lore, with regards to morality between the Horde and the Alliance, our perceptions of how that stuff is going, and well, we'll chat about other stuff too, while my idiot self just wanders around aimlessly around Stormsong Valley and whatever the heck zones here in Kultras. So, John, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm doing well. John and I have talked like for a couple of minutes, doing sound checks, doing all that stuff, prepping for what we're going to be talking about today. We touched on like a number of topics, right? And well, let's just kind of get right into it. Like, I'd love to hear like what are some of your concerns, John, with how Blizzard is painting the Horde and Alliance in Warcraft today.
I mean, I have quite a few concerns. One, of course, being the standard concern from an average Horde cuck such as the two of us. So it seems as though the Alliance is getting painted in a better light, where our war chief is doing all kinds of more gray type things. I mean, all in all, though, when you look at it from a perspective of what is considered generally morally sound within the World of Warcraft, which is a pretty wild perspective of things, that maybe what she's doing isn't so bad because of the just cause that she's doing it for.
Some of the interesting things to know. Oh, and by the way, John, maybe in chat, if I don't know if you're on chat, if you want to link your channel, that'd be cool. So that way people can check you out, subscribe, and see what you're all about. But yeah, with regards to Sylvanas and the Horde in general, like something that I find very interesting is that we've seen a lot more coverage about the Alliance and like their development from like books and story and whatnot. They're trying really hard to develop them, even though at the same time there's not too much happening. At least the way that I perceive the Alliance, there's just not a lot of internal activity. It's them. I find them kind of boring. It's all about justice and be doing the good thing and all that. Whereas the Horde, a lot of more people are talking about the Horde because they're just more interesting because of the questionable things that they're doing. It leads to more conversation. So it's funny because I find it to be like the Alliance are being portrayed by Blizzard and their writing and the in-game and some of the in-game stuff, but more of the conversation is coming from us about the Horde.
I mean, it seems like pretty much all the conversation thus far comes down to the Horde when people are talking about morally questionable things. I mean, you could always, of course, look at the Knights of the Ebon Blade when you're looking at potentially more morally questionable acts for a greater cause, such as trying to reinvade Light's Hope Chapel to raise Tyrion Fordring to be one of the four horsemen. That to me is pretty questionable because, I mean, I really like the way that you use Bob to get the point across of like the difference between desecrating somebody's soul and bringing somebody back to life to like allow them to have a second chance at life versus using them as an instrument of your bidding and forcing them into what they're doing,
So what do you think of that? Like, so there's a topic that I've been meaning to cover like forever with regards to necromancy and how that's such a bad thing. It's so evil. And Sylvanas is like raising the dead and so on and so forth. And the way that I've been understanding necromancy and the difference between someone like Sylvanas raising the dead versus the Valkyr raising the dead is markedly different. Like, we've seen Sylvanas raise constructs in some of the cinematics that we've seen in the Battle for Lordaeron, in those cutscenes, and even afterwards, even after the battle is over, you go back and you see some of those same constructs running around kind of mindlessly. However, they're not forsaken either, at least not the way that I interpret it. Not the way that the Valkyr are able to raise someone from the dead with their mind kind of sort of intact, and they're able to be given a choice whether or not they want to run around. Like, do you see? Do you feel that there's a distinction there at all?
I feel that there's a really interesting distinction there, actually. I've always wondered why it is that, like, the Forsaken in themselves are able to get their minds, yeah, as you said, kind of back intact, almost as though it's like, almost as like it's like their soul is still there in a way. But then you have like these massive abominations in the city. Well, who is it that created those? Is there like what they would consider a good necromancer? I mean, I don't know about that really, but
well, it feels like with regards to necromancy or like any of these powers in general, Blizzard is doing they're taking very big strides in defining whether or not something is just inherently evil or if it's just all about how do you wield it. Because then we get into the subject of the light and how whether the light is like this forever always good thing, or is it simply a tool? And from that, it just depends on the users, because like I've talked about the light a number of times and how it's kind of inherently good and kind of not, and it's been cited numerous times by commenters that it's more it's very much a great thing, because we see instances of the Scarlet Crusade and how, yeah, cool, they might have been paladins and they might have had the best intentions from the start, but then they were usurped by the likes of, I totally forgot the Dreadlord's name, but they were usurped and they were influenced negatively, and now they became like this crazy band of zealots.
I mean, I was actually going to bring that topic up in the first place. The way that the light seems that, I mean, it's focused on one destiny, like one possible outcome, and they'll do anything and everything possible to reach that outcome. I mean, that seems in such a way that it almost forced the people like the Army of the Light who follow them, like without any kind of shadow of a doubt, because, you know, if you've done the Lightforged Draenei starter quest, of course, that's what you do. You dispel all your doubt, all your fear, any question that you would have of the light and its ways, that if you have to go as far as purging a race because you feel as they're, you know, destructive onto the point that you're trying to get across of the light is the ultimate way and the ultimate good, that's what they'll do. And they don't have any kind of question of it whatsoever.
You know, and I find that interesting, because normally when we would read about the light and that sort of thing in like the Warcraft books, even in the Before the Storm book, we see Anduin and other folks, they feel soothed by the light, that their doubts are erased. So as a reader, we can tell ourselves two things. One, which is the easier thing, which is the more natural thing that comes to mind. Oh, the light is in fact this soothing force, this ability to calm the nerves and otherwise make people feel better about the decisions that they're making, or to otherwise soothe panic and so on and so forth. At the same time, I could also write a narrative that the light is this manipulative thing where it will make you feel better about the things that it wants you to feel better about. How it makes you erase doubts about doing whatever the heck the light says, or otherwise making you feel coddled to the point where it's like, oh, the light, you know, associating myself with the light, it feels good. So I'm going to do what the light says because, well, the light makes me feel really good about myself.
I completely agree with that point. I mean, it almost seems like, you know, a gambling or an alcohol addiction in a little bit of a way, because it's like, you know, you're burning yourself in a way by soothing your problems and all of your other fears and doubts with one specific outlook. But that's why they always look to the light to solve their problems, and then they're going to in turn follow what is solving their problems and giving them what they want and giving them the soothing feeling that they want, regardless of the struggle that they're in.
So help me understand the opposite of this. Help me understand the void really quick, because I can't. And I think that for many players and people that try to understand the lore and at least the core of what is going on with the void, which is all about insanity and infinite possibilities, it's harder to understand. And at least in my opinion, that's what makes it a little bit easier to vilify the void. I'm sure a lot of it is because we have a past history and the void has been pretty overt about, yeah, we want to return everything to nothingness. Everything is telling us that the void is bad, but is it? Because I myself have a hard time trying to understand it and trying to make it look like, okay, it's not that bad of a thing.
See, I feel like it's not necessarily that bad of a thing either, as it really looks, especially at the point in the narrative that we have right now, it looks like the light and the void are very seriously two sides of the same coin. Whereas the light makes you erase all your doubts and all your fears, the void induces all your doubts and all of your fears, causing you to then want to explore all other possibilities because you don't know which way it's going to turn out. So you want to keep trying to look and look until you find the one that you want, and then you're gonna pursue that specific outcome. You know, the light's seen one path since the beginning. You know.
Yeah, I like the way that you interpret it, because I've always seen I see the light as like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the light will kind of manipulate it'll kind of manipulate the lesser races into thinking, yes, this is the path of the light, this is the good way, this is what I've seen. But it almost seems like they're deceiving people when they use that line that, oh, this is your destiny, this is what we are predicting. It feels more like they have a plan. They have a very specific plan in mind. This is what they want people to do. And so they will say and do things like get into people's heads, get people to have, I don't know, bad dreams in order to get them to steer towards this destiny that they themselves are writing. It's not because they're actually clairvoyant and they're trying to steer people onto that path. It's more like, well, this is what they made up. And so this is what they're going to try to execute on.
The way that I see it is the light and the void it's almost like peace versus freedom, because to have peace, which of course in my perspective would be the light in this sense, you need tyranny. You need a forceful hand to reckon with that will like kind of influence you into doing the correct thing at all times. Whereas for freedom requires chaos. Because to have true freedom, there isn't anything to tell you what to do at any point, and you just pursue what you believe is your best destiny.
These NPCs want to kill me. I'm like trying to do stuff. I'm just trying to wander around at the same time. This is what I get for actually trying to play the game while talking with you. Oh, goodness.
That's all right, man. Just try not to get killed.
These things just don't want to die. They're like being very stubborn. So, so for anyone in chat, if you wanted to bring up a topic that you wanted us to like touch on or mess around with or talk smack about, feel free. We'll try to get to it wherever we can.
Me myself actually made a really good point in chat. They said there's nothing innately good or evil about them, but so far one was exclusively used by the quote good, but the other was used by quote evil. But now Blizzard has shown that, yeah, both can have good and evil users. That's a really, really good point. That's exactly what I was getting at, that you can take the light and make it a good thing and use it in a force of goodness, but then also use it to push down something that disagrees with you.
It's funny because we don't see, or at least I don't see the void being used in a very specific way like that either. It's being just very plainly or very, in I guess, a boring way. It's just being used as a tool for an agenda, whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's just a thing that they use. Like, I guess it's when it comes to the light, people wield the light, but they also wield it as a believer too, more often than not. It's like, well, I'm a holy priest and I serve the light, and this is what I do. This is what I try to push. When it comes to the void or void related stuff, you only really see that kind of that really kind of fierce representation from like the Twilight cultists, or the super extremists, where basically I guess what I'm saying is that the void is very niche, or it's very fringe, but the light is for the most part mainstream. So I wonder to myself if that's just between those two fundamental forces, is that just the way that they operate until they want to like enact on their actual agendas, and then they strike or something like that?
That's what I felt like too. It almost seems like they're like, at least from the Void's perspective, like it's sitting there going through these possibilities and trying to figure out which direction that it wants to take you. Kind of the way that it is with Illyria, that it was with Illyria during the most recent Windrunner comics, when it started to go across the point of like when she saw Sylvanas the first time. I'm sorry, I got distracted. When she saw Sylvanas the first time, the Void started whispering in her ear, kill her now, kill her and save the world, kill her and save yourself. I mean, that makes me think that maybe the Void does have a specific agenda, because I did mention this in one of my videos too, that maybe the undead or a force that is trying to stop people from dying of any fashion, be that the Scourge or the Forsaken, which I actually think there's a distinction between the two, because it seems like the Scourge tried to disembody the souls of their victims, whereas the Forsaken are trying to keep the souls so that they can, again, continue to live their lives and have free will and make their own choices. I feel like that distinction, it's very, very gray.
Gray. How should I respond to that?
What did you say, man?
No, I'm just like, haha, it's gray. But please continue.
What was that, man?
Oh, I must be lagging a little bit. Go on. I think I just kind of interrupted you there. Now I feel bad.
Frankly, I got distracted from the topic I was on anyway. So let me scroll up a little bit in chat and look at this.
All right. Well, I guess to respond to that, like I wondered to myself, with regards to the whispers that Illyria was receiving, and the fact that we're looking at a comic medium, I wondered to myself, I don't think the whispers of like the Void or the Old Gods or whoever, I don't think that they whisper like every now and then. I think it's simply they talk to your ass all the time. I mean, you go insane for a reason. With regards to the Void and their whispers, and I think it's because they're just talking all the time. It's just that for the purpose of the comic, that's when the whispers become their loudest, or they become whispers that actually get through, and it's not something that Illyria just tunes out, because I believe that's something that she had stated in the comic, that she just kind of ignores them for the most part or pushes them down. But when it comes to something more that's in front of her face, such as when Tyrellian's close by, that's when the Void was saying, oh, let's do this, convert him, kill him, blah blah blah. And then Sylvanas, same thing. I just thought that's, at that time, this is one of those rare opportunities where Sylvanas is in a vulnerable position. So of course the Void would be like, dude, this is it. Let's like take her out. Let's take advantage of Illyria's misgivings and feelings towards the Horde, and try to get them to take out Sylvanas, who is not just the leader of the undead and a force that the Void can't easily control, but the leader of the Horde, a very powerful military force that can smash their brains in and all that. But as for the Void having a natural fear of the undead, that's something that I'm much more of a skeptic on, mostly because it's not like kryptonite. It's not like exposure to undeath or something is going to suddenly kill the Void. It's more like they just can't control the undead the way that they control or whisper at others. But they could still, of course, throw fireballs at them and smash them with hammers and all that stuff. It just feels a bit more like a practical, it feels like more of a practical conflict than this is a fundamental reveal, oh my god.
I agree with you entirely on that. And I actually, while you were going over and responding to me, you reminded me of what I was talking about in the first place. I don't even think it's necessarily like an innate fear of undeath in itself, whereas maybe if they do kind of exist or have a plane in the Shadowlands, that it might, I don't know, that undeath itself, especially undeath in the form like what Sylvanas is doing, using the Valkyr to raise people with their souls to have some kind of sanity, maybe that soul feed lacking out of the Shadowlands that they could be getting from this war and suffering that Sylvanas is then turning away from them could be causing them to not gain the strength that they want. if they did gain. Because I mean, if you look at the way Yogg-Saron claims to be the god of death, and that our petty squabbles do nothing more than feed their strength. I mean, maybe they get strength from death in that way.
It could be something like that, but I just see like the tenets of necromancy and raising the dead as just another practical skill. To me, the light is a little bit more unique because the light is all about worship. It's all about believing in the light, and that seems to be a very strong prerequisite in order to at least wield the light, as well as the strength of the power that you can project with the light. That's why Anduin and all his faith is able to pretty much battle res an entire battlefield full of dudes, because his faith in the light is that strong. That's why Prophet Velen is able to wield the light as he does. And otherwise, people who waver a little bit, maybe not so much. But at the same time, you think of folks like Archbishop Benedictus, who was the, oh god, what was it called? The Twilight Father is how I remember him. And he was a priest. He was able to wield the light and otherwise soothe people, but at the same time, he was the freaking Twilight Father. He was a servant of the old gods. So I think it's just a matter of how much you believe in the light itself, and you could maybe you can fool the light as well and fool it enough to make it so that, oh yeah, I can wield it, sure, but I'm all about like the darkness and all that.
I mean, I feel as though, especially when you look at like, actually, again, me myself made another really good point. But as of Legion, it became clear that if someone doesn't want to have faith in some Naaru, they aren't beyond enforcing that faith and obedience. No, they're definitely not. I mean, when you wield both the light and the void, I mean, have you read a Thousand Years War or listened to the audio drama?
Yeah.
Okay. So with A Thousand Years War, when Ilaria kind of seems to figure out the secret that the only way to see the truth is with the combination of the light and the void, maybe that's where the Twilight Father got like his excess perspective on what he would consider the truth, is because of the way that he very openly wielded both.
I think you cut off there. Still got you, right?
Yeah, did you not hear me?
Oh no, you cut off a couple of words, but yeah, you're talking about how the Twilight Father, his perspective is enhanced because he's able to wield both the light and the void. I think that's a very interesting piece of it, and it does make me wonder about some of these more prophecy-like things that we've been hearing lately about, like old god whispers, the whole thing with the master's table and the lights, as well as the prophecies of the light about the child of light and shadow, how they're supposed to bring an end to the burning legion and that sort of thing, and beyond that. The whole idea of prophecy and destiny among the light and the void, to me that's mostly, more than anything, just another form of oppression by either or. Because freedom, being forced to be free is still being forced to be something.
I mean, exactly. Technically, that's a really good outlook. To force any kind of will on anybody is still forcing something in a way. I mean, you kind of can't go one way with that and not the other. If you're gonna force somebody into doing something, you're forcing them one way or the other.
I mean, that's why I'm convinced myself. I have convinced myself, at least, that in the end, we're going to come to some sort of grand confrontation where it could be an expansion level event where players or the champions are going to be forced to choose between the light and the void. I do not think that this is going to result in some sort of actual faction change, more like an Aldor Scryer sort of deal, where we might have enhanced abilities, or we might have like the big gimmick of this expansion is going to be something based on either the lights or the void. It's going to be balanced. It's going to be pretty much the same thing but different colors. But the idea is that people are going to take a side, and from that, in the end, it's going to be up to us. Which side are we going to choose? And I think that in the grand plot, in the greater story, as the people of Azeroth, they're going to choose neither, and we're going to effectively revolt against these great primal powers, because we're going to find out that these big powers, the light and the void, their end game is to somehow corrupt Azeroth, whether it's the void to turn it into a void titan, or my own crazy conspiracy of the light that they want to light forge the world soul itself, bringing in their own form of end game, and otherwise doing something awful to all of existence, something that the mortal races just don't want to happen.
I mean, that's a pretty solid perspective on that. I never really considered it in that manner, because wow, like I said with the whole Sargeras thing, maybe it's a matter of like when he came across this void world and it scared him so much, you know, the Pantheon, they're trying to do the exact same thing. They're trying to forge and force a Titan into doing exactly what they want them to do, and not to go in any other direction. The same way that when Sargeras strayed from their path, they got infuriated.
You know, I never thought about that either. That the mission of the Titans was their own form of absolute. You know, they want to find their bros, and well, I guess their perspective or their mission is a little bit more limited. I mean, they have like their whole idea of preserving life on planets by helping out these worlds and getting them started with their thing. But at the same time, they want to find like their fellow brothers and sister Titans and all that. And unfortunately, after the initial formation of the Pantheon, they were only able to find like one. They were only able to find Azeroth. Meanwhile, it was Sargeras during his crusade where he found Argus and the Titan soul in there, and like that was kind of it. So I guess he was just doing his thing with and trying to enact his mission of destroying the universe and all that stuff.
It seems like with the ordering of Azeroth, man, that there has to be a conduit of each different absolute. There has to be something that forces each different possible hand of fate. Be it Sargeras becoming the Demon Sultan and deciding to begin his burning crusade, or be it the Pantheon going on their mission of arcane and order purity and the spreading and flourishing life so that they can res a Titan in their way, or the Void and the Light's way of doing the exact same thing. The only way to find true balance in the universe by the seam of it is to have one of each in existence, because when one gets defeated, another one comes into major power that they shouldn't have.
It's like when something big is lost, there's something to fill that gap or to make up for it. It's like in the grandest scale of the Warcraft universe and the franchise itself is that there's always going to be like some sort of balance. And it's funny, I barely recall from a recent quest or text or something like that where the Naaru where the imprisoned Naaru in the Netherlight Temple was referred to. You know, actually, this is from the Before the Storm book. I'm remembering stuff real time barely, but in the Before the Storm book, the Naaru that was trapped in the Netherlight Temple was referred to as a Void Lord. So that's just more like that's kind of an off-topic thing, but
whoa, now that I did not know that, and that's a really interesting way to look at that.
Let me find that text actually.
That maybe the Naaru are the lords of the light. You know, they're of course the ultimate conduit and the ultimate being and like representation of what the light is. But then a Void Naaru does the exact same thing for the Void. Wow, man! Especially with the way that the light tried to forcibly influence Illidan into becoming Lightforged, whether he wanted it or not. Maybe that's what the Void Naaru does. Is it pushes and like forces its bidding. And that's the way that they use that power that can be pushed through a conduit that strong to help influence and push said whispers of the Void into it, like into all of its victims.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say whether or not like that's just kind of a flub, which I don't want to think, but it could be, because we know that the highest orders of the light and the void are things that do not exist in, or they cannot exist except in small portions within the Great Dark Beyond, at least presumably, according to the Chronicles, unless they kind of like messed that up. But it feels like the Naaru or the Dark Naaru, whatever you want to call them, they're just two sides of the same coin. They're the same thing. It's just a Naaru is a fundamental building block of the universe that happens to be infused with light, and a Dark Naaru is a fundamental building block of the universe that does not have the light, and it just becomes the opposite of what it is, and nothing more than that. And I find it, and I do find it kind of weird that you can convert one to that it can be converted from one thing to the other given considerable effort. But it just feels like Naaru are like they're like the atoms or something of the universe, but they can be interchanged, just like how the Great Dark came to be at all, how it was just like an explosion of light and shadow, and they're simply fragments of that explosion.
I mean, exactly. I feel as though, sorry, I was waiting for that buzzer to stop. I feel as though that, like, for example, I know that nobody ever wants to consider anything that happened on Warlords of Draenor as anything to do with Warcraft lore.
Too bad. Deal with it.
Exactly. But like when Velen, like alternate universe Velen, like sacrificed himself to cleanse that Naaru of the void, and then they were able to get rid of the demons on Draenor, you were left with the exact same problem, an overabundance of one presence on the planet, which then wanted to overtake the rest of the planet. Leaving the light there to deal with it itself is what led to the kind of the zealotness that you found coming from people like Yrel. Because, I mean, there didn't have anything else to fight. Now all there is to instill their bidding. That's all that's left.
So to my, this is all from memory, but to my memory, there was the Arakoa that were kind of worshippers of the void-ish kind of. There's the Arakoa that worship the void. So there was something there, but from the data mine text, which we can't really verify, but from the data mine text that we've seen in the beta so far and the Maghard recruitment scenario, the orcs, they cite that everything was cool until the Naaru showed up, because before that there wasn't really that sort of presence, not until they show up, I guess, outside of the story. So I was able to find this passage. This is where Anduin first arrives at the Netherlight Temple. Let's see, where's the excerpt? Okay. The very name seemed to set calm upon Anduin's soul, almost in defiance of the temple's history as the prison for Saraka, a void lord and a fallen Naaru, and its location in the heart of the twisting nether. Skaboosh.
Huh. That is definitely interesting. How do you feel about that, Soul? Like, what does that put into your mind as far as any kind of speculation that could give you?
It makes me wonder about the origins of, not even the origins, but the definitions of what constitutes a void lord. It's almost like a fallen Naaru equates to a window for a void lord to manifest itself, even in not so fundamental ways. I guess that's what they are. The Naaru are a window to the purest forms of the light and the void. I think
exactly. They're the only thing strong enough to be a conduit for that kind of raw, pure power.
Yeah. So I guess think of the Naaru as two things. There's Dark Naaru and there's regular old, vanilla Naaru. It's just a matter of which one do they happen to be, and depending on which one it is, they are the most pure expression of what it is, the light or the void. And maybe it's nothing more than that, because I don't want to think of a fallen Naaru as, oh, this is a Void Lord, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, does their, you know, when they become a Void Lord, does their power level spike to obscene levels? Not exactly, because we as players of the game, we kick their asses every now and then. So I don't think that they're necessarily straight up Void Lords, but merely the closest expression that we have to one. However, when it comes to like really showing up and like, hey, I'm here, I'm a Void Lord or a Light Lord or something like that, that's where Titan Souls come into play. Where if a Void Lord is able, or if it is possible to corrupt a Titan Soul, that would be an even greater expression of manifesting a, you know, the most pure void, and that would result in a huge imbalance in the Great Dark Beyond, and that would result in the Great Dark Beyond possibly turning into nothing. But we get into really cosmic levels there, and I have my own theories on that. But the same goes for the light. You know, if the light did possibly have an agenda to corrupt or light forge a Titan Soul, maybe a crazy imbalance can happen there too. I think that's what at from the whole light and void level, I think that's where Blizzard might be going with it. Oops.
I definitely see that. I was also thinking while you were talking about that, though, like maybe the twisting nether in itself, as it's been, you know, like talked about and been shown as evidence that it's just like kind of pure chaos manifest. That's what it is, and that that twisting nether, time works completely differently, almost as though it exists unaffected by time and unmoved by fate, right? I mean, if you look at the twisting nether as like kind of the open whatever goes, like light, void, order, and chaos all exist on the same plane, that maybe that's what gives these chaotic beings such as demons their ability, at least by previous canon, before we figured out, you know, that it was Argus who was fueling it, that maybe that was their kind of their idea on how they were having these demons regenerate themselves within the twisting nether, is that there was enough power due to all these forces coming together that maybe it would allow them to regenerate themselves there, unless they were killed there.
Yeah, the whole thing about, oh, they regenerate in the twisting, like that's something that was never very I was never very fond of that idea. I'm like, okay, that sounds like they just kind of pulled that one out of their ass when they were asked the question. They're like, oh, maybe it's like this, but well, that's what they gave us, so that's the lore that we have to work with now. But I don't know, it feels like with regards to the origins or what the fundamental meaning of the twisting nether is, it feels like it's more of, you know, the great anomaly that happened within the Great Dark Beyond, because I'm sure that there are all sorts of interesting things to explore in that part of the universe, and the twisting nether is just being one of them. It's just this big space anomaly where weird shit happens, where I don't know, it's more like a lore excuse. Hey, we can have all sorts of weird stuff happen in the twisting nether just because it's the twisting nether, and it's just the best excuse that Blizzard can make when it comes to that sort of thing. But I think of like the whole origins of the, well, I guess I'll drop that. I'll get to that I'll get to that at another time, and I'll let you talk.
I think we've had a pretty good conversation going thus far about the whole the differences between the light and the void, and that in itself almost leads into kind of our influence into morality with the same concept of like peace versus freedom. Because I mean, even without pulling in like current politics into the whole thing, it is almost political in that same kind of view, that some people want peace and some people want freedom, but you can't have both. And to have both is kind of what life is, be it like, you know, the quote criminals or outlaws versus the peaceful good people as it's considered. Maybe it's not just that black and white, and like the combination of the two is what makes life life.
But what do you think some of this negativity comes from with regards to players who are really militant with their beliefs that, you know, this is how the Horde should be, or, you know, the Horde are evil because of this and this and this, and this is regardless of what people. Something that I've very much observed is that people's negative perceptions of the Horde are based on like this blurring of the lines as to what the Horde is, because people will refer to, well, the orcs, they sacked Stormwind and they killed King Elane and all that stuff, and they caused all that stuff with Angrthar the Wrathgate and yada yada yada. And I have to point out to in those cases, well, you're dealing with two different hordes there. You know, the first one you're talking about is the Orcish Horde, and you know, they had their whole demonic influence. They were all orcs for the most part, with a little spattering of, I think, some goblins and ogres and such. But then with the new horde, that was headed off by Thrall and a band of misfit races that were kind of on the verge of extinction. Like the Darkspirit Trolls weren't doing so hot. The Bilgewater Trolls, the Bilgewater Goblins, they were displaced. The Blood Elves were nearly extinct. The Tauren were in trouble, and so on and so forth. So you see, the Horde is a race of would-be survivors or struggling races, and even though they're committing, you know, some of them are committing dastardly acts, they're not the same horde that we've seen before the First and Second Wars.
I mean, it feels as though people just refuse almost to see what the Alliance has done bad. Like, I mean, let us not forget the acts caused by Garithos and by, you know, Blackmoor. Internment camps, torture, all kinds of fun shit.
Well, what I find interesting, though, is that those particular characters, especially Blackmoor, his idea, to me, Garithos, I don't think we've explored him very much, but with Blackmoor, Blackthorn, you know what I'm talking about. Adelis, I'll go with that. With Adelis, we knew what his motivations were. We knew what his plans were for Thrall, how he wanted to eventually control the orcs through Thrall and take over the Alliance. To me, that's probably the closest that I would see to actual evil, because like his motivations are malice and absolute greed on his part. However, what he does isn't exactly representative of the Alliance at the time. It was just more like it was more of a symptom of just what they were dealing with, which was like the Horde internment camps and that sort of thing. But one thing that I'm a little bit about with regards to like some of the moral grayness is the idea of internment camps, period. Why have them?
I mean, but exactly, the entire existence of internment camps comes down to like a necessity for the control of the other race. They have an internal need to want to control the orcs because they feel like they're the only righteous race out there, which again brings me back to the whole Garithos thing, which was part of why the Blood Elves went extinct. The way they got turned away by the Alliance, he believed the humans were all that there was. They believed the humans were better than everybody else, so they turned the Blood Elves away. I mean, with the Alliance doing things like that, it almost seems a little bit racist, you know? Like the couple of races that they accept is all that they accept, and anything else is kind of, you know, cannon fodder. Whereas the Horde takes those outcasts and those leftovers and those misfits the exact same way that when the Forsaken was denied by the Alliance in the first place because they thought they were monsters, but yet still accepts Death Knights back into their society, right? That's the difference.
Yeah, that's what that throws me off. But I think that's more of a gameplay overcoming lore piece of it, because at the very least, the Death Knights don't exactly have a house within the Horde and Alliance main cities or, you know, capitals. It's not like they're freely I mean, some of them like are hanging around, but it's not like they're considered all that welcome. For the most part, they all stick to their little hovels over in Acheris, and like that's it. And I just disconnected myself. Nice. I'm in game, I'm like wandering around, and I think I happen to fall into like nothing, or the realms just went down. So
It could have gone either way.
Oh well, I'll let that thing sit for a few moments. Sheesh.
Man, I feel like, yeah, the Alliance has done a whole lot of morally gray stuff, but I'm just almost excited and waiting, especially as a Horde cuck, the two of us both. I'm excited and waiting to see what, quote, gray things the Blizzard is going to have the Alliance pull. Like what they would consider to be a gray act by the boys in blue, you know?
I wondered to myself, like, if, because anything that would happen, it would happen under Anduin's watch. So part of me is hoping that the morally gray things, or however we want to label it, I don't know if it'll be morally gray so much as just like a big fuck up by Anduin. I'm waiting for him to screw up. To be honest, I think that this whole, like, the events from before the storm, they are in line with Anduin's sense of goodness and justice and wanting peace and all that stuff. But he screwed up. He shouldn't have done it. He shouldn't have done what he's doing, because despite his best intentions, what he wanted to do is enact his will on someone else. His whole thing was families. This is what's important. This is what your people need, or this is what our people need. So let's meet up. I think that's incredibly inconsiderate of, when it comes to like world politics and trying to push beliefs onto someone else. I think it would have been better to do something a bit more practical, like a prisoner exchange or something like that. So I can get back on.
The prisoner exchange would have definitely been a whole lot more practical, especially considering the way that it got handled. But is there really a reliable, better way to handle it? Or do you have the same risk of the same thing happening over again?
You certainly do. But I think the premise of it was, it's not a mutual benefit. I mean, the whole thing is about a demonstration of peace. Cool. But how about something more practical too, like like I said, prisoner exchange, or just like what the letter had suggested, just getting right to the meat of the matter and getting into this whole idea of Azerite, as well as the possible doom of the world. Maybe the threat of what's going on with Azeroth isn't quite, maybe it isn't quite the, God, what am I trying to say? Maybe the threat hasn't really been defined by the Horde and Alliance, because Magni hasn't really gone around to say, hey, you know what, the world is freaking ending. Let's all band together. But I could say it's kind of Magni's failing as well to not communicate what's going on very well.
I mean, I'm actually just about, like, this is the video that I'm doing right now. This is my current project. I feel like Magni almost failing to be an ambassador to it isn't his fault, and that it has a whole heap to do with the fact that Anduin and Sylvanas have both already been influenced by the way that the Azerite made them feel, and now they have their goals set in their mind, and they're going to do it one way or the other. I would link my YouTube channel if I could, so that people could get a lot more detail on my perspective of it, because it's going to be about an 18-minute video. I have a whole lot to say on the matter, but to make a long story short, maybe I'm trying to think of the best way that I can put it. Give me a second. I'm looking up some notes. If you have anything to bring up to them while I find it.
I'm just trying to load up a working client. I guess the beta realms decided to go down. I'm like, oh, that's great. Nice.
Dude, I've been trying so hard to play on the PTR, but like every time I go to try to play on the PTR, the character copy option's like not functioning.
Yeah, correctly. It's not there. So like people are pretty miffed about that. Like I was very lucky to transfer a character onto there right before they turned that stuff off. So I'm a little surprised. Looks like, well, they had it before. Why not now?
Yeah, for real. Like, why would you take away an option like that if you're trying to get people to test your content? Nobody's going to want to level from level 1 to 110 just to see what's going on.
But we have to know. We got to test stuff, man. So I take it like you haven't have you looked at any of the Wowhead stuff on like the war campaign and how that plays out?
I haven't. I was actually going to ask you if you had any insight on that because you've been able to play into a lot of this content.
I decided to. Well, I didn't get too far into the campaign content, which is unfortunate because I have a feeling that maybe some of the Wowhead stuff is out of date because it's been a while since we've seen like the full campaigns from both factions. But at the same time, in order to unlock all of it, you need to basically get to Revered with one of the primary factions there, and it's a kind of a lengthy process. It's pretty grindy to rep yourself up high enough. At least if you're trying to do it quickly, you're gonna have to be grinding a lot of world quests to get your rep high enough to get access to all the war campaign content. But from the looks of it, like you don't really get into much with regards to, oh, this is the Horde are clearly being evil with this. It doesn't really go either way. The way that it is perceived to me is that these two factions are very clearly at odds with each other. They're very clearly at war, and they're trying to disrupt the efforts at forming alliances with these respective factions, the Kulturans and the Zandalari trolls.
I got drawn into a little bit of conversation that was going on in chat between Simon and me myself. To answer your question, me myself, yeah, it surfaced before with when it didn't necessarily surface. The goblins just kind of dug deep enough to find it. That was actually brought up in Before the Storm, and that's part of a little conspiracy video that I had put up a few weeks ago about Gallywix maybe being a pawn of the void. He even admits specifically that the volcanic eruption that destroyed Kazan may not have even been caused by Deathwing or the Cataclysm, that they're digging in greediness to get more Khajiite to feed into the Khazar-Kola market that they had, with as money hungry as they are, struck down into a quote vein of Azerite, or a vein of the world soul itself, because that was the first time it had been discovered. And he brought that up to Sylvanas specifically, that he had already seen it once before after digging deep enough to find it.
I barely recall the scenario where you go through Kazan and all that stuff, but didn't Deathwing literally fly over Kazan, and that's what, or at least presumably, we're led to believe that that's what caused the eruption?
We're led to believe, yeah, that that's what caused the eruption, was Deathwing flying over it. But the volcano became active, like, and this is even in the quest, it's the quest text itself. The volcano became active before Deathwing flew over Kazan. And at the same time that the volcano became active, you're in the middle of torturing troll slaves to dig deeper and dig harder to feed into that Khazar-Kola market. So it's like they've been hinting at this all the way since Cataclysm, and are just now bringing that to some more light.
Yeah, I remember watching that. I don't remember, or I watched your video. I don't remember everything that came from it, but it is an interesting theory that it could be Gallywix himself that has been compromised. It's part of me wants to think to myself that it takes a little bit longer than that for you to drink the void Kool-Aid, I guess. But for all we know, like his exposure might have been his exposure to it. Could have been early on. The thing that makes me only slightly skeptic of it, because I don't want to put this idea to bed at all, is that why would Gallywix be that close to a mine? He's Gallywix. Why would he be down there? I figure that he would be like up in his penthouse doing his thing while ordering his little goblin shits to do their thing and mine away and all that stuff. But it could be. The whole discovery of like the Khajiite and the Azerite at the time could have started the idea of that influence.
Maybe when Gallywix got bribed in the first place by his little goblin lackey that, brought it to him, maybe that influenced the old gods to start whispering to Gallywix and to try to start influencing him, because he had such an influence over a large group of people like that, because he might have been able, with as greedy as the goblins are and their willingness to, put into an effort of war, that maybe they started whispering to him to start adding into this even more to cause more death and destruction, which then again leads back into my theory about, the old gods potentially existing to a degree in the Shadowlands and feeding off of the power of death. And that's why they benefit.
That's the one thing I'm a pretty fervent skeptic of, the idea that the old gods are like hanging out in the Shadowlands and all that stuff. Because at least in my opinion, I haven't seen much evidence at all that there is any sort of master of the Shadowlands. Like everything that's in the Shadowlands is just dead. It's a place to go, but it's a place to go, and you can kind of go in and out as necromancers and people that are calling upon the spirits. They can draw upon the Shadowlands, and heck, you can kind of go there too. Heck, we as players go there as soon as we die. But I'm not too keen on there being like anyone that can actually manipulate the Shadowlands. The closest thing would be
I think Odin. Argus could. I mean, as the Titan of Death and as the Unmaker, maybe the same way that Freya has like ultimate control over the Emerald Dream, maybe Argus in his slumbering state or in his being tortured by Sargeras state, like develop the Shadowlands as it exists. Because if Freya controls the like side dimension of life, then why wouldn't the Titan of Death control the side dimension of death, right?
Right. I'm thinking to myself, though, that with regards to Freya, she quite literally built the Emerald Dream. I mean, the Emerald Dream is basically like, it's like the Azeroth PTR, where you see all sorts of different versions of Azeroth and that sort of thing. And that was a constructed piece of thing. With Argus being like a Titan of Death or so, not so much, because the Shadowlands, at least according to the Chronicle, was there very early on. From the feel of it, I think or at least I don't recall. My book is somewhere around here. I believed that the Shadowlands is more of a mirror universe of sorts. It's not just the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream is small by comparison because it just encompasses Azeroth, whereas the Shadowlands, it's like the other side of it's the upside down, right? Or if you've watched Stranger Things, it's the opposite of everything, and that's been around ever since the creation of the Great Dark itself. So that idea, I'm not too sure about. It's something that Blizzard could always write in, but it seems like the Shadowlands predates the Titans themselves.
Now, exactly. There had maybe predating to the Titans themselves, because there were already planets and there was already like a form of existing life, because as the Titan Pantheon like started exploring, they found these demon infected and these void infected worlds. It seems like there maybe were even like existing races like the Nathrazim, for example, who predate the Titans, because the Nathrazim at the time where Sargeras discovered them already had like a fully established world and like were the record holders of the universe and stuff. Like, I mean, maybe the Nathrazim are themselves just as old as the Titans in a way, especially if like chaos in itself, like chaos as a manifestation, got a hold of a planet and did the same thing that like the Void and the Light and the Order, being the Titan Pantheon, are trying to do to the same planets. Maybe chaos just got to one first.
So that's why I think that the Nathrazim would probably be the closest that we could, one of the closest that we could get to having a sort of Master of Death, because after all, it was a Nathrazim that crafted the armor that basically created the Lich King. They created the armor and the idea behind the rune blades that allow for the manipulation of death, the raising of all that bad stuff. But apart from that, the Titans also have a very strong power over death as well, because ultimately the Valkyr are a construct of the Titans in a way, or at least the Titan Forged, which are a construct of the Titans. So it kind of goes down a couple of degrees, but it just goes to show that the idea of necromancy, undeath, that sort of thing, it could be manipulated by all sorts of races, and who otherwise would be aligned one way or another.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the point that I'm getting at. And I mean, it seems as though each different form of order, like this, like, because even the light, of course, has its ability to raise people from the dead and have its own manifestation and control over death itself. Because of course we've seen evidence of this in the Light Forged resurrection of Kalia Menethil. On top of that, of course, the Void has their way of doing the same thing, which, you know, with your like faceless ones and stuff like that, they aren't even technically supposed to exist. I mean, and they're able to manifest them into our world. The side of chaos seems to have their own ability over like life and death in itself, with the way that they use the twisting nether to regenerate their own kind. And of course, the Titan Pantheon, being order, seems to have their own way of manipulating death by the form of the Valkyr. It seems like, again, it all comes down to all of them being on the same side of, like, on the two sides of the exact same coin. Just like when you look at like the ordering map that was in the First Chronicle book that shows the way that the universe was ordered between necromancy, order, light, and void. It's the same concept. There's a reason it's all in a circle, is because it all plays into each other, and that you have to have a balance of all four to have any kind of existence. Because if one is able to overtake the others, then all of life will cease to exist.
Yeah, it comes down to like the whole fundamental, you know, light versus void thing, and I don't know, it makes me wonder like what the end game is. You know, at least when it comes to like at a cosmic level, what is the end game for the light and the void? Is it a return to nothingness and all that? Because if you read the very first thing from the Chronicle, like the origins of the universe itself, you get into how once upon a time there was light, at least presumably, and the swishing around of the light and all of its super awesome cosmic energies created rifts, or not rifts, but it created gaps where light, the energy of the light wasn't there, and from that created a void. So you effectively have what is sort of a soup of light and void, and from there you see conflicts, and within those conflicts you see explosions and other swirling basically explosions of energy. And one of those explosions is what created the Great Dark Beyond, which is the Warcraft universe. So at least that's my theory, is that this whole universe that we live in the Great Dark Beyond, is just one out of so many others in this swirling sea of madness between the light and the void. And it's like goo. It's like this very slow moving cosmic thing that's always going to be swirling around, and there are going to be some parts where these little pockets, these little air bubbles, almost, you can kind of think of the Great Dark Beyond as an air bubble, where they'll pop and they'll kind of collapse on each other, where the light and the void were just smashed together and there's nothing in between. And everything inside is just destroyed. That's kind of how I see the idea of corrupting a Titan, either with void or with light. How did I get back into this subject? Whatever.
Dude, I love that perspective on it.
But anyway, corrupting a Titan is what causes this air bubble to pop. It's a return to nothing. Whether it's light, whether it's void, it doesn't matter, because nothing else is going to exist there. But at the same time, there's going to be an air bubble that pops up somewhere else too. And it's just going to be ongoing forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. That in the end is how I see like the whole cosmic order of everything that is Warcraft. So of course, in the end, it's like, oh, the universe is so big, everything that we do here doesn't matter. But that's beside the point. It's the fun and the dynamic that happens within this that makes things interesting, and that's why preferably I would love to see like an end of this whole light and void thing, like, period. I would just love for the narrative to go away.
I feel like that might even be the narrative that Blizzard's going to bring us into with the next expansion. And to super quick to respond to Simon's question, yes, it was Odin. Odin made a deal with an entity of the Shadowlands. The entity of the Shadowlands, of course, being Helia herself, to allow him to have Valkyr.
Wait, I thought Helya was a construct of Odin, and then Odin wanted Helya to make Valkyr, and she's like, I don't know, dude, I don't know about that. And Odin's like, yeah, you're gonna do it. And so he made her into the first Valkyr, and he just made her into a Valkyr factory. I don't recall an entity of the Shadowlands. Help me out with that one.
As far as I was aware, she became the entity of the Shadowlands when he created her and forced her to create the Valks, and then banished her to the Shadowlands to do that bidding.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, I don't recall there being something that existed in the Shadowlands, like basically a master of the Shadowlands. I don't recall that, at least not yet. Blizzard can always write one in, but
that's where I think that Argus may be that only master of the Shadowlands, because again, he's the Titan of Death, the same way that, like, you know, Odin was created by another Titan construct. I mean, if he made a bargain with the master of the Shadowlands, assuming that Argus is that master, maybe that allowed him to create the first Valkyr, maybe gave him the power or infused him with the power to create a kind of queen of death like that, because in a way that makes her the Titan of necromancy, or the Titan construct of necromancy. Like, that's kind of her power. The same way that like Thorm's, like, I mean, like Ra's Titan ability was like his ability with lightning and stuff like that.
I can see that. I'm just thinking about the whole timing of things, because Argus as a Titan, you know, the Pantheon didn't know about him until basically now. I think they didn't know about him until now. So if he is the Master of Death, I think he was a pretty shitty Master of Death, because we beat his ass down. But
right, every Tuesday.
Yeah, but I could see something like that, with having there be a construct that's specifically designed to like manipulate death and all that stuff.
Just the same way that there always has to be a Lich King. I mean, there always has to be a Lord of all the elements, right? There has to be a manifestation of fire, of Ragnaros. There has to be a manifestation of wind, of course, Alakir, or whoever the new Wind Lord is. I even think it might be Thunderon again, as per the Shaman quest lines. Or, you know, you got Neptulon, and then maybe the Lich King, of course, being that elemental of death. If he dies, then someone else has to take his place, right? Maybe there has to be...
Actually, well, let me pose that question. Does there have to always be a Lich King? Because there wasn't one before the Lich King.
That's a good question. That's a really good question.
Because I know that the idea of the Lich King is, hey, it can control the undead. Without the Lich King, the dead will wash over Azeroth, and everything will die. But will it? I mean... will it really?
Or will that just give us an opportunity to fight them down to the point where no more can arise out of it?
Yeah, because if you basically kill off all the intelligence of the Scourge, and you reduce them to all of their basest instincts, it's more or less the Lich King having lost control over all the undead. Where would they come from, and how would they sweep the world? And would Azeroth really be unprepared for a washing over of the Lich King? Because there's a fear of, or there's the prediction of, oh god, the Lich King is going to come back, and he's going to cause all this bad stuff to happen. But wouldn't like eliminating the Lich King altogether be like, it's written that it's going to be that so much worse if you just not have a Lich King, but would it? Or would
I mean, exactly. Like, was there even a Scourge before there was a Lich King? Like, before Frostmourne was created to forge this Scourge army, was there even a Scourge?
Nope. There was undead. There was the idea of necromancy. There was the idea of the rising dead. There was the idea of like a plague or something like that, but not really. The idea of the blight was entirely a Kel'Thuzad Lich King sort of thing. Magic plague. You know, if there was something like, oh, if the Lich King dies, then the magic plague will suddenly be unleashed and everyone will become Scourge, okay, then I could see that. But just to hear about, oh, well, the dead are going to rise, or the dead are going to sweep the land and all that stuff, not so much.
I mean, exactly. Really, not so much, because then there is no more feed to it. I mean, is there even really any more of a feed to it per Blizzard's lore? Because Frostmourne the thing that allowed the Lich King to raise more scourge, because the Helm of Domination, as far as I'm aware, only allows him to control them. Frostmourne itself is what gave him his overbearing power toward the undead and allowed him to raise them and sever their souls from their bodies. Like, I'm pretty sure that's what the ability was. And now the Death Lord or the Death Knight champion is the one who wields the remaining shards of Frostmourne. So can he even grow that army anymore? Like, without the Death Lord's help, could he even continue that army's like strength and ability? Or would he then be reduced to only controlling his massive army that he has actively?
No idea. I mean, like when we first heard about, the Lich King, Bolvar is going to be the new jailer of the damned. It's like, why be the jailer of the damned? Why not just walk them all into a big old pit of fire? Wouldn't that be a more efficient way to go about things? And then from there, you Bolvar, the Lich King, can just kind of take a vacation and just hang out on the beach and do your thing. It'd be so much easier. But anyway, going back to the whole elements thing, you brought up an interesting thing, how there always needs to be like a lord of the elements and that sort of thing. But what about the element of spirits? Because according to Chronicles, the element of spirit is of such low abundance and life to it that's why the elements that we're seeing, fire, wind, and all those other bad cats, that's why they were able to run them up for so long, because otherwise, with a strong element of spirit, the other elementals, they just kind of calm down. But it's not like there's zero element of spirit, not that we know of. Would there or should there be a lord of spirit, kind of?
I feel as though, like, I don't have a whole bunch of evidence to base this on, because I'm still kind of trying to piece together my evidence, because I want to make a video on this topic specifically. But maybe that there already is some kind of elemental spirit, because the same way the shaman can tap into every other element in existence, they can also tap into the feral spirit. They can tap into the spirit wolves, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there is already an elemental that they can call upon to give them their ability with the spirits and with their ancestors and stuff like that. Because, I mean, they still have the same way of resurrection with ancestral spirit or with reincarnation. Maybe they already have a tie to what little existence of spirit is on this planet.
I had a theory way back where I talked about how Elune might possibly be this element of spirit, in that it's around. It's not very strong, but wherever it is, like, it does have a not exactly a soothing presence, but it has a natural influence on, like, the Naida or the Kaldarai, some of the wild gods, and some of the other folks that hang around that particular area. And it's also why we just haven't seen a whole lot of it, because even though we know that Elune exists, we just don't know. We just haven't seen it manifest at all. So it's a pretty weak theory. It's mostly based on the idea that, well, someone's got to fill the gap. Might as well be Elune. But that's kind of that is kind of my thoughts on what it is, because, like I said, it doesn't have a whole lot of presence, but it is around. It's something that you can kind of call on, and it does kind of sort of do things.
I really like Raymond Martinez's outlook as I've been reading it on chat, especially when, like, he said, while on the subject of elements, remember that Azeroth, the Titan, has absorbed the element of life. Draenor has a fifth element that we don't because of it. And would that be so bad if the Titan died? Azeroth, the Titan, absorbs our element of spirit to help her grow. That's a pretty good point, because as far as we're aware, Draenor, which has a balanced bit of the elemental spirit, which Azeroth does not, doesn't have a world soul within it. So maybe the fact that we have a world soul and she's absorbing it could be a pretty solid reason as to why the element of spirit is in such a short abundance.
Yeah, I believe that is the pretty accepted theory. So it does make you wonder, like, if heck, I would say, even given the state of Azeroth at this point, with, her being in danger, her kind of being on life support, and thus trying to help her out, is there anything, might we see an impact of the absolute depletion of the element of spirit. I'm kind of waiting to now that I have this in mind, I'm going to start wondering, or I'm going to start keeping an eye out for the very first hint where we might see the Kaldorei talk about, hey, you know what? I haven't been feeling Elune's light very much. Something feels like something's up. Something feels like it's missing. And as a non-alliance player, I don't know if I've seen anything about that. But I'm gonna keep an eye out for that, because if that is the case, I'll be more than more than convinced that Elune is either the kind of the manifestation of what a lord of the Lord of the Element of Spirit is, or just this spirit force kind of thing that might be indeed so weak that it doesn't really manifest and straight up talk to people, but it's just that's what the collection of all that spirit energy is.
But that's exactly what Elune does. She doesn't even really manifest as a whole and talk to people like you would expect another elemental lord to do. She just kind of pops in and she kind of pops in and does her dealio and then vanishes and does it off of the reflection of the moon. Maybe she's so weak because of that draining of the Titan soul that's why she's so restricted as she is, and nobody ever hears from her. They just kind of feel her presence.
So now with a big ass sword in Azeroth's butt or back or whatever part you want to describe that sandy surface of Azeroth, what is Elune's state going to be, if anything? If nothing happens, then nothing happens. But if it turns out that she's becoming weaker, it's like she's not answering the priestesses we pray to Elune all day in and day out, but we're not feeling her light, or we're not feeling her presence and all that stuff, then I think that'll be an interesting thing to check out. Because what if the spirit is totally depleted? How would the planet respond, knowing that it's in this critical of a state?
That's a really good question. Really quick, I gotta congratulate Raymond there on his comment that she manifests to bang stags. I mean, that's a pretty solid point. That's a pretty solid point there.
I would like to think that their whole coupling, as I'm going to call it, is simply like just, hey, I'm feeling you, you're feeling me. We're beyond sex organs and all that. So let's intermingle our energies and make something beautiful. And then Scenarios popped out. He's like, wow, look at me. I look so majestic and my voice is like so manly. It's that sort of thing.
He feels majestic with the manly voice, dude.
Scenarios' voice, man. He sounds like a villain with the way that his voice is. Like, he's something that you listen to his ass. Or else.
I want to know who voices Varrock Sourfang. Whoever voices Varrock Sourfang is like fucking Spartacus or something. I don't know. It's wonderful though. Like just the sound and the ring to it. It's a crazy, crazy ability.
I'm gonna look that up.
That would be awesome.
Because
Score said essential will chat with Soul.
Oh boy. Yeah, because I recall, like, I was looking up voices, because I was looking up the guy that does Nathanos, because I was like, okay, I need to get more voice samples from this guy, because I was trying to do some video about him. And there is a surprising number of voice actors that do like multiple things. Like the guy that does Garrosh Hellscream, he does like multiple voices. It's pretty fascinating if you look at that side of the industry.
Ooh, Garrosh, you just gave me another really good topic there, Soul.
Uh-oh. Shoot.
So, how do you feel about the Garrosh did nothing wrong meme?
I don't think it's a meme. I think that it is, well, this definitely puts us back into the whole morality thing.
I'm so glad you agree with my perspective then.
Garrosh, to me, as a blood elf, is an asshole, and he's bad. And I think who would agree? Let's see, which races would agree with me? Alliance races would agree with me. People that lived in Theramore would agree with me. Strong emphasis on the past tense. The trolls would, dark spirit trolls would agree with me. Garrosh rubbed hella people the wrong way, but for orcs, hey, he's cool. You know, he's a little extreme, but hey, he's all about that orc pride and blood and thunder and pandering to the more militant, bloodthirsty, fight thirsty orc. So he's not 100% evil or selfish, I would say. He's very, he catered to that fringe element of the Horde and of his people, because some people were taking his side. This is unlike Adelis Blackmore, who was extremely selfish with what he wanted to do. He only thought about himself. He was using everybody. Garrosh thought he wanted the best for his people as a whole. The Horde as an entire organization, not so much. He was willing to sacrifice all of the Forsaken for the sake of invading Gilneas. That was a thing. He wanted to assassinate Vol'jin because he was openly defiant of what he wanted to do. There are those things that define Garrosh as a bad guy. So he deserved everything that was coming to him. But it's hard to say. It just very much depends on the perspective of who you're talking to. Did Garrosh do anything wrong? And part of the answer is no, because Garrosh is a product of his influence, of his birthright, of the legacy of his father, of the pride that Thrall put into him by talking about the legacy of his dad, and Garrosh wanting to extend on that pride, the name Hellscream. He wanted to give that meaning. He wanted to give orcs the pride that they used to have when they used to run around with Garrosh. With his dad Grom. So it makes Garrosh a complicated character, where the idea of did Garrosh do anything wrong? It's a meme, but it's a complicated subject to go over. That's a lot of voice actors.
It's a really complicated and pretty controversial topic to go over, man. But it's such a subjective, opinion-based topic. Everybody has their own opinion on it, and everybody, just like with Sylvanas, has their own moral stance and moral opinion on whether what he did was wrong or not. Personally, I think his only major mistake as the war chief, like Score said, was kicking all the other races of the Horde out. I think he ran the Horde exactly like an orc would have run the Horde. And call me crazy here, but I believe if Thrall actually followed the sacred laws of Mak'gora, that Garrosh would have whooped him.
Yeah, I tend to think so too. Like he would have just been outfought, and that really would have been it.
For real. I mean, if Thrall didn't use his elemental influence, then Gorehowl would have beat him anytime. I feel like there's a really big distinction, though, between orc politics and your standard politics, the exact same way as there is with Forsaken politics. Because the Forsaken have no sense of what human morality is. They don't give two craps about our emotions, about anything of the sort. It just doesn't matter to them. They only care about success, survival, and victory. The exact same way that the orcs do. The orcs, at least the orcish horde that was ran in Garrosh's like idealism, was success, victory, and survival, and that's all that their idealism came down to. They didn't have any other need to preserve any other races other than their own, because that was his idealism. That the orcs were, of course, the superior race. Anything less was feeble.
And that's where I find the Forsaken to be a very tragic race. That kind of like how people aren't giving Garrosh any benefit of the doubt, although he did commit some pretty crazy shit. The Forsaken as a race, they're new to this thing. They're, you know, they haven't, they're freaking race of people turned into zombies, and they've only been around for as many years as they've existed, which is like 10 or so years. So if you think about it from a real world political standpoint, think of this as a new nation that's only about 10 years old, that's very, very unstable, that also happens to be a vassal of a greater organization, which is the Horde as a whole. So they haven't been around for very long. And I think it's to judge them based on their actions is one thing, but to just judge them as a whole without giving them a chance to even develop themselves as a race, as a government, as an organization, and as an entity, I don't think that's fair. And I've said this many times now, how I talked about the Desolate Council and how that was a chance for the Forsaken, not just Sylvanas, but for the Forsaken themselves to have a chance to do a little bit more growing and mature as a self-governing nation. Unfortunately, that chance was taken away when they were killed by Sylvanas, and as well as the feeding of their hopes by the likes of Anduin that, hey, you know what, maybe you can abandon this whole idea of living as Forsaken, and you can live and interact like a normal person. In a way, this is pretty negative of me to say, but in a way, Anduin attacked the Forsaken culture by making that the offering that he did.
I mean, that's exactly what he did. In a way, that was the offer that he made. I feel like he should have known, at least, like an experienced leader would have known that would have been seen as potentially treacherous, especially once the horn was blown and they were told to come back. The ones who ran, I'm sure Sylvanas was expecting that, you know, especially with this void of emotion as she is, how strategic and intense, like, of a leader as she is, especially having previously been a ranger general. She understands strategy to a whole different level that most races of Azeroth wouldn't, especially with as old as she is. That she could have expected that there would have been some to turn their backs on her because they had a taste of their past life. There's a reason that the Forsaken are restricted from doing anything involving their past life at all. Like it was mentioned in Before the Storm specifically. I cannot remember the guy's name, but there was a Lordaeron historian that was mentioned specifically in Before the Storm who loved his books so much, who loved everything about them, that he would occasionally sneak out of the Undercity to go back to his like previous home and steal some of his books and sneak them back in so he could have a memory and a feeling of his old life. Well, when he was caught by Sylvanas, I mean, they were like, that's your past life now. You live a new life, a life for the Forsaken. And I don't know. That to me seems a little bit pushy, but I can see how that would make her feel as though they would commit a treacherous act like turning their back on her and running back toward the Alliance. In a way, her accepting that may have almost been a way of weeding out. Like her accepting Anduin's offer may have been her own way of weeding out those treacherous few and then just killing the rest anyway because she has no idea. Again, void of emotion, and it's a matter of maximum potential for success.
I don't know, is it a void of emotion, or I wonder if it is her just kind of clamping stuff down? Because we've seen glimpses of her motivations and her failed attempts at trying to embrace emotions. We've seen that in the War Crimes book when he tried to connect with her sister Verisa, and that didn't work out, and she felt pretty hurt by that. We've seen it when she offed herself and she saw the visions of her of the Forsaken being sacrificed. Well, not even visions; they were more like a straight up clairvoyant prediction. We see it again in the comics where she once again tries to. It's one part trying to reconnect with her sisters and another part possibly trying to capture or kill them, but that's beside the point. In the end, it became all those things took an emotional toll on her. So for her to be void of emotion, that's not something that I can really accept. It's more like she's trying her very, very best to, one, fight them and avoid having her judgment be compromised because of it, but at the same time use those emotions and push that upon her people too. Like, hey, you know what? If you try to embrace your past, this is what's going to happen. You're not going to be very happy. So I'm going to stop you folks from doing that. At the same time, though, she does. It's not like everyone is trapped in the Undercity. People can leave. People can join other factions as well. And she doesn't. And from the looks of it, she doesn't really try to control those kinds of folks. It just seems pretty inconsistent how she chooses to handle those those sorts of situations, like with the whole, hey, you can't read books. You're not allowed to read books anymore, and other actions that she's taken.
It's interesting the way that she put it too, because she says really specifically with the whole book situation, the history of Lordaeron no longer matters. There is only the Undercity now, and the history of the Forsaken. That was to me, that kind of like hit a point. I agree with you entirely, and it hit the point where it's like maybe she's just forcing this cold calculation. She's forcing her hand in a way to make her seem completely emotionless so that nobody is able to pinpoint her weak spots, because she wants people to think she has none. And that's why she's handling it the way that she is.
That's the cost of having a very young government and being a self-proclaimed queen. I mean, she knows she ain't the queen of shit. You know, that doesn't define anything. You know, it's a brand new country. You're young. You don't know what you're doing, and you know, and she was being approached by the Desolate Council to be like, hey, you know what? We're basically, they come off as, hey, we're happy being Forsaken. We're glad that you gave us a second chance, and that you freed us from the imprisonment of being scourged and all that, and you give us a choice to live with free will or to accept death. But hey, Sylvanas, at least be consistent about it and let us have a final death at our own choosing, when we feel like we have completed, when we feel like we've fulfilled our lives and have done our share, and at the same time we've been loyal to you and we've contributed to the Forsaken and making it a better place. We want to die too. So it almost feels like in an ideal world where everything was peaceful and Forsaken existed, the Forsaken is like the social justice warriors of death, where join the Forsaken. We're a second chance organization where you can live a life without regrets, because we won't let you die until you've fulfilled everything that you wanted to do. Then you can die. It almost feels like the Forsaken, ideally, Sylvanas would have that kind of organization. But I think one of the big problems with that sort of logic is that she's an elf. And because elves live long lives, she has a perspective that normal humans don't share. So if a Forsaken is like, I might live for thousands of years, what? I don't want to live like this. Then Sylvanas would be like, oh, what are you talking about? It's great. You know, I've already lived for a hell of a long time, and you know, I don't have any problems. So I think it feels like there is a lack of understanding from Sylvanas to her own people, because they haven't really brought it up yet. They just haven't been around long enough to really discover and to encounter these sorts of social problems.
That, or the ones who were going to bring that point to her attention got killed when they during the whole issue outside of Stromgarde.
Well, that's what happens when your ass just tries to run away. But at the same time, like in a very cynical sense, the Desolate Council got exactly what they wanted. They wanted to eventually die. Well, they almost all of them died. It does make me wonder, like, about the future of whoever is left of the Desolate Council, the very few who survived because they were rejected outright by the humans who they met up with. Will there be a future there? Will that side of the Desolate Council still seek some sort of social change, or are they scared as hell of Sylvanas at this point? They're like, nope, I'm not going to ask for a damn thing. Or are they seeing this from are they seeing this as a negative reflection on the Alliance? That's, oh well, shoot, these they were talked into my my not coworkers, my counterparts were talked into running because of that Kalia Menethil chick. You know, screw her, she sucks. I guess what I'm saying is complicated. This can easily get very, very complicated or become very simplistic if you want to you see it that way.
When it comes down to the whole thing with not only her assassinating the entire Desolate Council, but taking out Kalia Menethil in the perfect, really cold way that she did, she kept to her word exactly. Like, there is absolutely no response that the Alliance or even any of her own people, any of the Horde for that matter, can give legitimately. Because then all she has to do is claim treachery. Like, just a fear of a potential treacherous act. I mean, look at American laws. If you're even thought to be conspirating in high treason, like, you go to jail anyway. It doesn't matter if you're proven innocent or guilty.
Yeah,
if they think you're conspirating. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, the idea, the critique, the understandable critique from people that say, "Oh, well, she killed everyone, even those who were like running back." I mean, I kind of get why she would kill the people that are running back too, because you know we don't know exactly what's.
Were they running out of fear or out of loyalty? There is no telling.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it wasn't for Kalia, I think if Kalia wasn't discovered, I think that Sylvanas wouldn't have straight up killed everybody. She would have killed the ones that ran, absolutely, because quite literally, I see that as in game. I flagged myself for war, and I'm running towards the other side. Obviously, you know, NPCs are naturally going to suddenly target you and want to take you out. So I have no remorse for those who ran away. The ones who ran back, of course I feel for, but it's because of the presence of Kalia that I think Sylvanas is like, ooh, okay, this might not be Anduin's thing, but this is definitely Kalia's thing, and she's trying to, you know, usurp the throne or try to stake a claim for Lordaeron. So I gotta clip this thing like 100%. All of these people gotta go. Let's see.
Kalia, the entire issue with Kalia being a usurper, to me, I mean, but because she isn't really a usurper, she's claiming her own crown. I get where Sylvanas would want to deal with that and stop it in its own tracks, but like that just sucks. That sucks on her own part. Like she feels like she has no opportunity to get back her crown, and that's where I feel like we're gonna have some leniency into the whole light and void becoming our new factions thing. Because especially if Kalia Menethil can somehow manage by the end of the next expansion or two to usurp the crown of the Forsaken and to become the new Dark Lady, I guess. Well, I guess she would be the Light Lady when you think about it like that, and or potentially be the racial leader for an alliance faction of Forsaken that are Light Forged or want to be a part of the alliance again. It just comes down to then again, Sylvanas would be super, super salty because then there's Forsaken that aren't following her. Like it's like she claims that she wants to give them free will, but if they're going in another direction, then they're her enemy no matter what. So is she really giving them free will, or is she pushing them in her direction on purpose and making them think they have free will?
The short answer is no. I don't think she's trying to give them like straight up free will, but it's her way of being a helicopter mom or a helicopter parent, because she knows what it's like to, and understandably, a lot of the Forsaken know what it's like to feel persecuted and hated by the other races, even within the Horde. Like they're looked down upon because they smell, because they're like rotting flesh and like that's gross. But I think Sylvanas is trying to protect them from that as best as they can. Not everyone is as hardy as those Forsaken who are like, screw it, I'm just going to leave the Undercity and kind of do my own thing. And they do. They leave. They do other things. They join other factions. They become pirates and do other and have their own bits of violence and shenanigans. And I think Sylvanas seems to be totally fine with that. the story of the Desolate Council and the Forsaken that we see in the Before the Storm book mostly involve its weaker foe, its weakest people, the citizens, the ones who are just raised and just want to live lives and they're just kind of maintaining things. They're not the, they're not the hardened soldiers of the Horde. They're not the Dark Rangers that sniped like those citizens in the end. They're just normal people kind of falling apart in different stages of rot. And those are the kinds of people that it feels like Sylvanas is trying to protect. The ones that want to live because they made that choice to live. But at the same time, yeah, she gives them a very strict and pretty oppressive life for what she thinks is for their own good and their own protection.
That's a really neat way of looking at it, because it does seem really, really oppressive. It in almost no way feels like freedom. Because, I mean, she doesn't want freedom for her people at all. She wants her people. Like, as long as she has a following that's alive, that's what seems that matters. Or an ability to increase the size of her following and or army.
That's something that I still wonder to myself. It's like, why does she want more Forsaken? She knows that it's, I'm sure that she knows by now that they're kind of difficult to maintain, even though they might be like immortal and such. Yeah, maybe not everyone wants to be Forsaken. So that's why I kind of got into the idea of, well, maybe this is like her own way of being on the side of social justice, is to raise the dead and say, hey, and just ask them, hey, do you want to keep living? You want to keep doing stuff? Yes, no, cool, okay, great. No, darn, okay, I guess back into the ground you go, because she's totally fine with that. But it's like, once I got you, you're mine, bitch. I'm gonna hold on to for as long as I can, and not let you go because I love you.
I find it, I mean, yeah, exactly. And as to a matter of like, when you look at the Forsaken starting quests, when at least the like post Cataclysm ones, you're raised by a Valk, and the Valk tells you you have 3 options. You have an option to stay dead, to be resurrected and follow the Banshee Queen, or to be resurrected and follow your own path. But be known that when you follow your own path, I don't know exactly what it says, but like it's like when you follow your own path, any kind of attempted dismantlement of the Banshee Queen and her following, then you're an enemy to them or something along those lines.
It just sounds like don't be a Twilight cultist. And yet we see a lot of Forsaken becoming Twilight cultists and and other such awful factions. I think that's all it is. Don't just come back so you can come stab us in the back later. That's a pretty obvious betrayal, or I would see that as a pretty obvious betrayal on my part.
I mean, yeah, that would, in all intensive terms, would be looked at as treason, I guess. But then it's not really treason because, they don't follow her, even though she's the one who brought them back from the dead. I mean, I guess it's just kind of an act of war in that sense, in a way, because they chose not to be a part of her faction. They chose to go do their own thing. And then if they're fighting her, then that's just one faction attacking another. It'll end in the same result as the Alliance attacking the Horde.
I mean, it's just, I guess I just see it as typical protection. Are you going to make war on us? Yes. Well, fuck that. I'm not gonna let you back up. Back into the ground you go, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah, it's about the same way that I see it too.
All right, it's like passing notes.
I still can't get off this whole Garrosh thing, man.
Go on.
It bothers me. It bothers me.
Well, which part
when you
bothers
think
you?
about the scenelet of like the scenario in game of the Thrall and Garrosh's Makarov. Garrosh made some super amazing freaking points, man. He made him who he was. He made him war chief and then abandoned him with no guidance. Like, how is that his fault?
Oh, I definitely see that too. Like, Thrall's lines I found to be incredibly unconvincing. I was like, really? That's the only that all basically all Thrall said in response was, "No, I did not. I didn't do it. It was you, buddy." Mm-mm.
Right, bro. It's like somebody trying to blame their little sibling for something. That's like, but he didn't. No, I didn't. That was all you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, like granted, Garrosh dropped bombs. It's not like Thrall told him, "Hey, you know what? You know what's great about being an orc? Dropping bombs on our enemies. All right, I'm gonna save the world. Bye." So there are things that Garrosh did that obviously are wrong in most perspectives, except for ones that are very closely aligned with Garrosh. But at its most fundamental points, like Thrall failed as a leader, utterly, because he let that happen to his horde. So it makes me wonder what's going to happen later on with Thrall's kids. Is he going to abandon them too because he has like a duty to them or something, or is he going to try to be like a decent dad and doesn't want to raise another Garrosh? I'm really hoping that if Thrall does come back to the story, or at least if they could, or at least if they do decide to explore Thrall's story again, that they really do get into that. I'm not going to raise, or I'm not going to create another Garrosh Hellscream. Not this time.
And now, if they did make that part of the narrative, if they made it clear that he didn't want to raise another Garrosh, then that would them just be confirming that it wasn't Garrosh's fault. That would be Blizzard saying, "Oh yeah, guys, you just killed an innocent man, just so you know."
I think that's going a little bit far. I'm not going to say that Garrosh is innocent.
Definitely not innocent, but I mean, oh, dude, that would be like somebody assassinating the president of the United States. I mean, no matter what president we've had, they've never been innocent, but that doesn't mean that they did anything perpetually wrong.
I think the more important message that I would get from that is Thrall's acknowledgement that he failed as someone who made the wrong call, deciding to make Garrosh war chief instead of like his bro fists, Vol'jin or Cairn.
Should have been Nazgrim or Sourfang, man. I've always felt that way.
You think it should have been them? I don't know. Like, at least at the time, there wasn't enough, I guess, development between those two. But at the same time, like, I guess Thrall tried to follow the same structure that the Alliance does, because in the Alliance, it's not exactly the High King that runs the Alliance. It's more Stormwind runs the Alliance, and so on, and it's whoever runs Stormwind that happens to be in charge. And this is mostly because there's so many humans. Same thing kind of goes for the orcs, or I'm sorry, for the Horde and the orcs. The orcs appear to be the most numerous out of all the races, except for these days maybe the Nightborn. I don't know, but I think maybe Thrall tried to follow in that same vein, where it's like, okay, whoever is going to lead is going to lead the Horde. I'm going to choose an orc instead of a troll or a Tauren. But I don't know. Like, I think that I think they just didn't really transition Thrall very well. It just made it look bad, because they tried so hard to make it so, okay, orcs are going to continue being the vanguard or the leaders of the Horde, where maybe Thrall should have sold it as, hey, you know what? We're going to let the Tauren have their turn, we're going to let the trolls have their turn. But I don't know. I'm just kind of getting ranty about that part.
We have a topic suggestion in chat, a Reddit theory, and the theory is, could Anduin Wrynn be the son of Arthas and Jaina? Not even really of
what?
I'm pretty sure that the theory is of Anduin being Arthas being Arthas being an illegitimate, not Arthas, Anduin being the illegitimate child of Arthas and whoever Anduin's mom's name is.
Because the hair. Of course, it's the hair. It's so obvious.
Exactly.
The short
I
answer
know
is
she's never been seen in game, but I don't know that Anduin's mother had blonde hair. I wonder if they did that on purpose.
my short answer is no, probably not. I mean, we would need to account for 9 months of lost time at least. At least. I don't know the dates in my head, but I'm just thinking that to be an incredibly unlikely thing. Especially because, like, at least in game, we don't see the interactions between Anduin and Jaina like quite the same way. They never hinted at her being motherly at all. Yeah, that sort of ambiguity just wasn't there. So, no, based on no information, no, I don't think I don't think he's like their kid. Heck, I don't buy into the idea that Talia is Bolvar and Kalia's kid either. At least not yet. I don't think there's enough information. I don't think there's enough information for that.
Do you find it interesting that it seems as though, like, since the very beginning of the forming of, like, the Alliance of Lordaeron, like all the way back to Thoris Trollbane, every single leader previous to Thoris has been a human. Everyone. There hasn't been another, like, overseeing leader of the Alliance that has been any other race besides a human. Whereas the Horde has had leaders of multiple different races at this point.
Well, when think about the Orcish Horde, yeah, it's always been orcs because they were very, very, very much just orcs. With regards to this new Horde, yeah, it is kind of interesting that we've had shifts for different reasons. I mean, the idea of the transition from Thrall to Garrosh, that was more like a dynasty kind of thing. Hey, let's keep it in the family. Let's keep it in with like orcs and stuff. And then when Garrosh was deposed, it would have went back to Thrall by default, but then Thrall's like, nah, screw that, I don't want it. Let's give it to Vol'jin. And so that broke that broke the idea of there being a sort of dynasty, because Vol'jin didn't have kids that we know of. So that sort of thing wouldn't have flown. And obviously Warchief isn't supposed to be like it's not like being president. It's not like it's a temporary office and all that. But if anything, it's simply, I think it's simply just a matter of, well, they've lived longer. These certain war chiefs just haven't been around for very long. By contrast, the races of the Alliance and the culture and the kingdoms of the Alliance, they're long established. I mean, the King of Stormwind has been. It's run by the Rin dynasty. The idea of the Bronzebeards, that's been around for years and years and years. The Draenei, while they don't have that same structure, they've been existing or running at least for the last 25,000 years. So it just feels like when it came to the initial forming of the Alliance, it was the human kingdoms that were the most numerous that started off together. So naturally, like everyone, the other races, they were more or less being kind of added on in smaller doses, including like the elves and the gnomes and the dwarves. Afterwards, I guess it just kept following through with the same thing. Humans are just the more numerous race. And so it just kind of fell to whoever was running the biggest human kingdom at the time. Before it was Lordaeron, then it was Stormwind.
So what do you think about the idea? Because I've seen a whole bunch of people saying this, especially with the way that people are like trying to throw their idea out for who they think would be the best war chief for the Horde. I've seen a lot of people saying that, like, say Anduin pulled a really big fuck up and like lost everybody's respect, as we were talking about earlier with this whole morally gray concept. Wouldn't Velen potentially be one of the better leaders for the Alliance? I mean, I know that the Draenei, on the perspective of how long the Alliance themselves, the Alliance of Lordaeron, have existed, have not been a part of it for very long. But Velen has led the Draenei through being chased by the demon lords through the cosmos for 30,000 years and sacrificed everything that he has for his people and everything that the light had even for his people, wouldn't that show as a potentially more viable leader? I mean, I get that they're trying to keep it in the family and they're trying to keep it down to the Ren dynasty, but when you look at like who would be a prospective better leader while Anduin's still learning to be king, wouldn't Velen hold that reign a lot stronger?
It's hard to say. So I'm mostly talking out of my butt for this one, but I see Velen as more of a spiritual leader than like necessarily a military commander, even though he does play that role too whenever it's needed. But it feels like
I would only agree with you if when you click on Stormwind Guards, they said light. If they didn't say light be with you. That's just the whole concept of almost all the alliance, aside of course the Kaldorei being so light influenced. Maybe they would still follow Velen the same way that Anduin leads them with the influence and guidance of the light.
I think so too, because I think about things like the not before the storm book, the Son of the Wolf book, or not comic. I'm sorry, where they show old Anduin and Velen standing side by side as they face the ultimate darkness, which is clearly going to be Sylvanas, 60 years from now, but whatever. The idea of Velen being a spiritual leader, without question. The idea of Velen being straight up leader of the alliance, I'm not sure. Because there are two kinds of alliance. There's several flavors of the alliance. There's one, us, the players, the champions that play through it and what we would just like to fanboy and gush over. And then there's the alliance leadership. Like how would the Council of Three Hammers feel? How would Moira feel? How would the Kaldorei feel? How would Mechatork feel? And that sort of thing. And then there's the regular people, like the humans of Stormwind. How would they feel knowing that some dude from some space goat from some blue space goat is running the show, who had just shown up all of a sudden? Yeah, sure, he's all about all about the lights and whatever, but who is he really? Because hey, he might be a cool guy, but we did just go to war with his brethren over on some green planet thing.
Okay, you make a really good argument there, but let me propose my side of this argument. Sylvanas is the exact same problem. What members of the Horde that not only were you just fighting her brethren, that she escaped their grasp, of course, because at one point she was a member of the Scourge, and it's made really clear that nobody trusted her, especially Vol'jin. What would make you think that the members of the Horde would want Sylvanas as their leader the same way that it would be with Velen? It could, in just a matter of potentially best outcome, assuming, of course, that the Loa whispering to Vol'jin to tell him Sylvanas would be the best leader is accurately because she would be the best leader. It could just be the same concept.
First response is touche. Ooh, that's a good point. I guess the way that I would not write it off, but my explanation or response to that would be that at least Sylvanas has a history. Like, we've seen what her accomplishments were before the Third War, before she was turned. We've seen her accomplishments during the wars against the Orcish Horde way back in the day. So she has a list of accomplishments to stand by. Everything else has been the slow building of trust, kind of, sort of, maybe, in part of her and the Forsaken, and the rest of the Horde. Is the Forsaken contributing? The short answer is yeah, for the most part, yes. They've obviously had some missteps with the likes of Putress and Verimathris and some of that other stuff. But as for her questionable ability at leadership, that not so much. I'm not saying that she would be a great leader of the Horde. I've actually been on record to say that she's not going to be a very good war chief. But the fact that she is effective militarily, that's not something that I question at all.
I think I agree with me myself. Mechatork, Mecha Torque for the King of the Alliance.
I just want to steal that dude's mech and like just
Me
ride
too.
that thing, dude. I could care less about he or she who rides atop that mecha.
Who needs Memoron's head when you got Mecha Torque's freaking toys, man?
Hey, I will
so cool.
I will take that flying goblin headcopter thing like any day. I can't wait for that thing to come out in BFA. I'm totally gonna craft that the first chance I get.
Speaking of Memoron's head, interesting little story on my mount farming escapades. I've been trying weekly for Invincible on 5 different characters ever since the release of Cataclysm. Of course, bringing friends along until it got to where it was soloable. Still haven't gotten it. I went to Ulduar to try for Memoron's head one time during Legion, one time, and I got it. Still haven't seen Invincible.
Damn. I haven't seen either. I know that I admit I haven't been farming all that hard for those kinds of mounts. Mounts aren't normally my thing. I love farming for transmog, but mounts not so much. But I've long written that off. I'm never gonna get some of those cooler mounts.
The only one that matters to me, there's 2, is Ashes of Alar and Invincible. If I get those 2 mounts, dude, I'm satisfied. I've already done and given up on the Time Lost Proto Drake. I mean, it has that name for a reason, dude. I lost way more time than I'm willing to admit trying to get that stupid mount.
I remember my wife and I, we farmed for Ashes for a good long while, and then Mr. Pandaria came out along with the Black Market Auction House. So I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep an eye on this and see if there's anything cool. All of a sudden, Ashes pops up. I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to try to get it. And I got it for like only $250,000 or so, something like that. I mean, it's still kind of a lot of gold, but still, it only took about 260,000 gold, and Ashes of Alara was mine.
A buddy of mine got the Reigns of the Plagued Proto Drake from the Black Market Auction House for like 5.7 million. Of course, because it's an unobtainable mount. As far as his opinion's concerned, he said it was worth every copper.
Oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, for me, there's so many mounts these days that it waters down the flavor for me. But like, if anything, like if there's a mount that I want, it's not because it's unobtainable. It would simply be because it matches or it's aligned with who I am and it matches like the rest of my transmog or something like that. But otherwise, mounts are like such a low priority for me these days. I'm more about like the appearances and stuff, and even then, like I can be pretty picky.
I'm not even super picky about my character's appearance. Ever since vanilla, the cool people were the ones with the epic mounts. So it's always been a goal of mine to have the coolest looking mount that I can have, in my opinion. And the rarest and coolest one I have is definitely the Ultramarine Kiraji Battle Tank. I love that mount. It took me so long to get it.
I still don't have it. Screw you.
Hey, I still don't have the recipe for the Vial of Sands. As long as I've been doing archaeology and I have the Kiraji Battle Tank.
Sadness. That's sadness, man. I still need to work on. There's still so much stuff that I need to work on with regards to like finishing like Legion content, and I still don't have like the first aid title. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it in time unless I like, go ham on like the group finder or something like that and work it.
Oh, dude, nice. I lost interest in first aid at the end of Wrath of the Lich King.
Oh yeah, so did I. But the fact that it's going to go away and all that, it at least makes me tempted to work on this, getting these last couple of achievements.
Them scrapping first aid is just as sensible as them scrapping this like fabled survival profession that was supposed to be in game. It's the exact same thing. You can do the same thing with tailoring the tailoring and alchemy that you can do with, of course, with first aid, because you can make your little like quick response health potions and stuff like that. You got your bandages and your other various things that give you health back at a quicker manner than a bandage. You can make the same things with tailoring. So I think them combining those professions and lowering down the amount of secondary professions could in the long run be pretty helpful.
I'm hoping that we get like a couple more flavorful things that come in the form of like a secondary profession or otherwise a unified profession that anybody can have. Like you were talking about survival, and there are other possible things that all players can participate in. But it just feels like secondary professions themselves, they feel like they're being watered down a little bit too much. Like, I don't know if you've looked at cooking in Battle for Azeroth, but it seems incredibly lackluster in compared to Legion, because you don't have a lot of flavorful kinds of foods except for one that turns into a pig person or something. But you don't have something like bear tartare or fighter chow that have some really cool and snazzy effects to it. So I think there's a little bit something to be lost, even though that does kind of prolong the value, or I'm sorry, it does preserve the value of this sort of food in Legion. It gives players a reason to at least go back and check that stuff out and farm for other stuff.
First of all, seriously, I mean, rest in peace to the survival profession. I think that could have been one of the most intensive RP based aspects that this game could have had, especially with like the dim torch and stuff like that. If they were to take an area like Duskwood and give you an obstacle like making it super, super, super dark at night and you barely being able to see without a dim torch, it makes it so much more immersive in my eyes. Especially with as long as I've been playing, dude. Immersion to me with a game like this is everything. Like if I don't feel immersed in it, I have lost all interest.
Oh, you're playing the wrong game then. WoW immersive? Aw, that's cute. I do believe
it's not.
Yeah, I do believe in the immersion. And to me, it's smaller things. It's not crafting arrows. It's not going around and picking stuff. It's more passive stuff like the music, the voices, things like that really draw me in. Like, I don't know if you've heard the music from the last I think like 1 or 2 builds ago. They released most of the music. Some of that stuff is it gives you chills. It's honestly something to behold. And to me, music definitely defines like a zone. Like right now, on stream, I'm wandering through Suramar, and in my head, I can still think of the music. And unfortunately, you know, like some of what the NPCs would say, but it's things like those that draw me in just as much as it would be like if I were to experience more RP stuff, like things being darker, or having to eat food every now and then, or having to make arrows and apply poisons and use reagents to grant myself blessings and all that stuff. So some of it I miss. A lot of it because of the repetition of the game. It became less RP and just more inconvenience for me.
I agree with you. Once it gets after so long of having to do the same thing, and you waste so much gold trying to get what you're trying to, you know, have your maximum DPS output, especially from the perspective of a rogue, which I played for a really long time, you know, previous to the poisons profession being taken out of the game. When I realized how much gold that I spent keeping my poisons up at all times with as heavy of a raider as I was at the time, I couldn't have even imagined how much faster I could have bought my epic mount, for example, while I was sitting there trying to farm AQ40.
Raymond and Nelia brought up a subject that is kind of near and dear to me. But what would you think about player housing?
Oh God, Garrisons left such a sour taste in my mouth about that. I think it would be awesome if they did the right thing with it, but seriously, Blizzard killed it, man. Like they killed all my hopes and dreams for enacting player housing efficiently into this game. I had such high hopes for the Garrisons. I did an entire video on how high my hopes were for player housing in the Garrison system, and the way that they just got crushed my dreams, Blizzard.
There were a lot of things that were wrong with the Garrison. Like for me, the big messed up on the approach was that they made it so central to what the gameplay was going to be in Warlords of Draenor, to the point where it pretty much negated outdoor content, and something like that just makes me go, "Buh!" You know, why'd you do something like that? And at least from the initial announcement, I think my biggest disappointment from the Garrison going to as it came to life when it hit live was that I really wanted to rename my followers, and you couldn't anymore. I'm like, oh man, I wanted to name it after like guildmates, and I'll like get them killed or something like that. I thought I'd be able to do some cool RP things with it. So yeah, it turned out to be a fantastic disappointment. But that definitely was not player housing. I mean, I think Blizzard said as much as like it's not player housing, it's Blizzard's, you know, imagining of what player housing would be, and unfortunately it sucked. But I do have hopes that it's something that Blizzard is willing to execute on, and I think it can be. It's just, you know, it would just be done again. It'd be done their way, but I think they can incorporate some cool things that can revitalize world content, that can make professions feel cool, as opposed to just making like 10 items, which is kind of what we're seeing in Battle for Azeroth. There just isn't a whole lot of crafting options out there right now, and there's just a lot more that could be done if there was a loud enough demand for it.
One of the most disappointing things to me that came out of the garrison system, man, was the utter isolation. Like that bothered me in so many different ways, the way that they just like shut you out from everybody else and gave you zero reason to leave your garrison, especially when it came down to getting raid tier epics out of garrison missions. Like, you didn't even have to leave to freaking raid anymore. You didn't have to gear your damn character. Your followers would do it for you. Like, what's the point? That's not even a game. It's a Facebook game, man. Like, what everybody said was totally right.
You know, what's funny about the Facebook argument is that I totally disagree with it. I don't think it's a Facebook game. I didn't think it was a Facebook game at all, because Facebook games involve like socialness. And you know, if you think about Facebook games, what was one of the big things that drew people in, that made those games successful? It was, hey, if you want more resources, you need to go to someone else's garrison, I guess in this case, and click on some stuff and help them out, and then you get some points. Or you would tell a whole bunch of people you would invite a bunch of people, hey, you know, join my party so you can come join my garrison too. That didn't happen either. So
that would have been almost better. It would have been better as a Facebook game.
Yeah. So if anything, no, it's not a Facebook game, because they failed on that as well. So I don't see it like that. I simply see it for what it is. It was the replacement for outdoor content, and it was extremely unfortunate that that's how it went. I mean, it wasn't just that the garrison was better at producing materials and providing like some gameplay and rewards. It was that the world outside sucked balls. There wasn't much at all in the form of like dailies and things that you would be out there farming for. Legion made up for it like 20-fold by having all sorts of toys and rares and other little things, other little reasons to be out there doing stuff. But Warlords of Draenor, no, total opposite. They just did not execute on that.
Goremonger actually just made a really good point about it. Garrisons may not have been a Facebook game, but they at least added Twitter integration. So I guess that was the very first Twitter game then, wasn't it? Almost.
I mean, to be fair, like the things like the Twitter integration, as well as like the selfie cam and all that, that's more of, to me, that was more like, hey, that's just like an add-on that someone built. Like that's,
dude, no, that's Activision adding into it, man. I swear to you.
Do you buy into? Are you the kind of person that buys into the whole Activision conspiracy that they're influencing shit?
I do buy into it a little bit, especially because you know really well that their marketing departments have to have some kind of conveying meeting. They have. So if Activision sees something that wouldn't be too profitable toward their market, then why wouldn't they push them in a different direction? Especially if it can involve more profits for them in the long run.
I don't see it, because then you would have to dismiss everything, because then you got to take the bad with the good. Because then you got to say, well, okay, Activision really got their shit together with making this Legion expansion. Because
that's
Activision,
a pretty good point,
because Activision really started pushing, hey, you know what? This didn't work. So, hey, Blizzard, I want you to make these things called World Quests, and we're going to invent this thing called Mythic Plus, because I think that would be great. So you that's the counterpoint. Sure, you can blame Activision.
Mythic Plus in your counterplay just got all my attention, man. You know that.
So that's my only thing about the whole ActiBliz thing. Sure, you can blame them all you want, but all you're doing is giving Blizzard excuses. Like if you think that World of Draenor was bad, don't blame Activision. Maybe Blizzard just made a bad call.
I mean, maybe they did just make a bad call. I don't know. The Dark Lord medicine seems to cause some issues. But before I forget, I'm telling you, Soul, I'm going to get you to do a 15 with me sometime soon.
You're going to have to like get me kicking and screaming. Like it's
I will, dude. All I have to do is have you in the instance when it starts.
I'm going to walk out before you kill the last boss.
Oh no.
Or I'll be like, oh no, I disconnected. Then. Oh, I'm so sad.
At least I tried. That's what matters to me. If I didn't try, then I can't fail, right?
So me myself is saying, he's sharing his unpopular opinion that he liked garrisons. I don't think that the premise behind it was bad. I think that the outdoor world was just so doo-doo butter that it made it elevated the garrisons to become the premier content of Warlords of Draenor, and I wasn't satisfied with it being the premier content of Warlords of Draenor. I wanted to be out in the world, like doing stuff, checking things out. The only thing that was the few things that there were to do in the world were fill up the bar quests, fill up the bar dailies, and the platforming with trying to get all those treasures and stuff, which I still haven't finished doing because I was just kind of butthurt by the world. It was that dull, as well as the perception of so much cut content and things that were there that should have become like content and didn't quite turn out to be that. I mean, they could have done something with garrisons where instead of having the herb garden and the mine and everything be in just one place, why not have some of that stuff located in the outposts? Like have the mine in Gorgrond because that's rocks, dry stuff. Point. Have the herb, or have the herb garden in Nagrand because it's green and cool stuff happens there. I don't know, just stuff like that. And then while you're out there, there's a couple dailies to help to help that thing along. I don't know. It's small things that could have been implemented that were not. That do make you wonder like what was going on in Blizzard's collective head when they were designing all this stuff and what kind of decisions were made. We're never going to know the answer until WoW finally like goes away and the people that develop those expansions can give some sort of tell-all, but I don't think that's ever going to happen anytime soon. It would be nice.
I don't know that it'll ever happen, man. As long as WoW's running, dude, I think they'll find a way to keep it going. I don't know that it'll ever wholly die.
Yeah, I mean, look at EverQuest. It's still going on, 20 some odd?
Exactly.
I mean, they're not operating on the grand scale and the huge updates that WoW has, but they're still going. This motherfucker's going to go around forever. So my hopes are that the WoW token stays a thing, so I never have to worry about paying for it ever again.
Oh, agreed. I mean, if anything, if sub-loss gets down to a point, they eventually could go free to play. I mean, who knows? If it gets down to the point where it hits like EverQuest, then maybe the one thing that we all fear from Blizzard, the day WoW becomes free to play is the day that major content patches are dead. Either that or that's the day the shop's going to overtake everything.
And to be honest, I'm surprised that they haven't invested more into the shop at all. Like I'm
glad they haven't though.
I prefer that they just go for it. Just fuck it. If they wanted to make stuff and just break the fourth wall and make like crazy looking transmog sets just for the sake of transmog, like I'm cool with that. I mean, I'm never gonna be for things that elevate power or make things more, that much more convenient. Like I wouldn't want them to have like reset your daily cooldowns for like $1 or something like that. I'd never want something like that, but I would be like, hey, let's make a freaking kind of like Overwatch costumes, how they're like super outlandish and crazy looking and stuff. Just go ahead and do that for a while too.
Yeah, that's different. I mean, cosmetic aspects are something the game's severely lacking as it is, especially since they've taken away the only way for us to have quivers and ammo bags on our characters. I mean, now it's just it's dull. Like what little transmog you can find, you're limited to a certain amount of weapons. Your shields, you got your chest plates, your capes and all that. But what if I want a cape that wraps around my shoulder or a trench coat or some shit? Like I can't have anything like that. And to me, that's a really big downfall that Blizzard has is their lack of not just character customization in itself, but like customizing the way that your character looks in game beyond standard gear sets.
Hey, I think I look freaking dope. So I don't know about
I
you.
love your Pally's transmog. Don't get me wrong. I do.
But
I love that Pally's transmog. That's great.
You are right in that there is a certain investment limit that I'm sure Blizzard can put into transmog and such, because for everything that they make, they need to multiply it by the number of races, the number of sizes, and of course there are quirks to it. There are obvious clipping issues that you would run into. I would love to see like a unified transmog costume kind of thing, you know, that sort of looks like half a toy, where like for example, like a cape, if you, or a cloak, I'm sorry, a full-on cloak with a shoulder mantle and all that stuff, or a trench coat, where it would just override most but not all of your transmog, so you can at least still have like a little bit of customization. Like I could have a cloak on, but I can have my bare chest underneath if I really wanted to, or not. But but things like that override other transmog, cool. I would probably pay a premium for it, and I think that it would damn near behoove Blizzard to consider something like that for the sake of getting a nice little money injection, because I'm sure that it would take pretty considerable time to design and develop a sort of like a trench coat. Let's just go with that. It would take some time to put something like that together. It would take away resources, but at the same time, why don't we just with a little bit more hiring, a couple of hires, would the income from a $10 $5 trench coat, would that justify the time that it takes to develop it?
I mean, I would assume so, especially with the overwhelming, like, it's not just like it's a couple people in a, we're talking like hundreds of thousands of people. So regardless of how long it takes, depending on, of course, what Blizzard pays the people to develop it, I mean, I don't see how with that many people, like that even just a $5, like that trench coat additive for $5 as an example, 100,000 people doing that could easily pay for like 5 people to have $100,000 a year salary, and that would just break them even. Not even to take the idea of how many other people who would love it when they see it.
Were you around when they first started selling the Celestial Steed? The very first?
I was. It's made of the tears of noobs, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. I remember buying it, and I was in a queue. To buy a mount for $25, and I remember that queue was like in the 30,000s or so. I got through the queue pretty quick, but that's the kind, just the idea of that, of, hey, I can just make like this one little cosmetic thing and it can go for millions.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Blizzard off of that mount probably made like a solid third or a quarter, or maybe even a third of like their yearly gross income from subscriptions just from that massive queue for that overpriced noob horse. And
I have no regrets. I bought it, and I'm cool with it.
I bought it too, man. I mean, I have it. I still rock it to this day every now and then.
Yeah. So with the kind of structure that comes from purchasable mounts, as well as the WoW token, those sorts of things, there remains to be huge opportunities for Blizzard to generate all sorts of income from just things like that. Heck, the idea of and this is one thing that Activision did obviously do, is have games be put onto the Battle.net clients. That as well has caused big influences on the price of the WoW token. It's affected the numbers when it comes to people buying the WoW token to take advantage of that. So even just the fact that Blizzard puts a non-Blizzard game on the client means that it's going to be an injection that goes straight into Blizzard's pockets, even though it's not their game.
I mean, like, how much more genius does it get than like putting someone else's game, on your launcher just to take their money?
It's a fantastic indirect income stream. It's smart.
That's evil genius. It really is. Well, Sol, on that note, I'm about to have to go and make dinner, man. This has been an absolutely fantastic stream. I've had a great discussion with you, man.
This was a lot of fun. I'm glad that we were able to talk on so many different subjects. We were able to, get some good interaction with some folks on chat, and we got some very generous people that made some very kind donations to the channel, and I very much appreciate that. And I appreciate you for joining me. John is new to the game. He's new to commentating and giving his opinions on through his YouTube channel, which I've linked, and I'll make sure that I throw a link on here when I publish this video later. But he's a fantastic character, as you have seen and have heard. He's a joy to talk to, and I'd love to have you come on again sometime.
Oh, by all means, man. I'd love to come on anytime. Just get in touch with me anytime that you have an idea or an opening, and when would be the best time to do it. I'm really glad that I had the interaction with all these people in the stream too. And I thought we've had some fantastic conversations. You really opened my eyes and enlightened me on a couple of specific subjects too. It gave me a couple of really interesting perspectives and has in fact given me 3 video ideas altogether that I've taken notes on while on stream with you.
I actually am probably going to review this and double check the things that I've said. So I should be like, I'll make a video on this. I'm probably going to do one on the beginning of the universe. I'm probably going to do something like that because I think that's kind of one of those deep things that'll make people be like, wow, that's a lot of bullshit.
The beginning of the Warcraft universe. That could be neat.
Something like that. But we'll just have to see. But once again, John, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
No problem at all, man. Take care.
Take care. And as always, stay breezy.